The next time someone tries to embarrass you in front of your team, most people make a mistake in the first 3 seconds that cost them the entire room. They defend themselves. They explain too much. They get loud, or they shrink and go quiet. And the second that happens, everyone watching decides who holds the power in that exchange, and it isn't them. But there is a small group of people who never lose that moment, not because they're thick-skinned, because they know 3 specific moves that shut rude behavior down without ever raising their voice. Here they are. I've sat in enough meeting rooms, negotiations, and yes, a few awkward family dinners to notice the same pattern over and over. The people who come out on top of a rude exchange are almost never the loudest ones in the room. They're the calmest. And calm, it turns out, isn't a personality trait. It's a set of learned moves, the kind nobody teaches you at work, because most workplaces would rather you just be professional and hope the rudeness stops on its own. It usually doesn't. So if you've ever walked away from a conversation replaying what you should have said, this one's for you. Stick around and subscribe, because next week's video builds directly on the second secret I'm about to give you, and you won't want to miss the setup. Here's the thing almost nobody tells you. Rude behavior isn't really about you. It's a bid for attention and reaction. Someone interrupts, mocks, or talks over you because on some level, they're testing whether they can pull your focus away from wherever it currently is and onto them. The moment you react, defend, or explain, you've answered that test. You've told the room their behavior worked. So the goal was never to win the exchange. The goal is to make sure the behavior never gets what it came for in the first place. That's where the first secret comes in. Secret number 1 is what I'll call the anchor phrase. It's a short, neutral sentence you use every single time, no matter what the interruption was about. Something like, "Let's stay on track," or "We'll come back to that," or "Let's keep moving." The specific words matter less than the fact that you always use the same 1 or 2. Here's the hidden mechanism behind why this works. Most people believe they need a clever comeback to handle rudeness, something sharp enough to put the other person in their place. But a comeback keeps the exchange alive. It gives the rude comment a sequel. An anchor phrase does the opposite. It closes the loop in 1 sentence and immediately redirects the room's attention back to whatever actually matters: the meeting, the deadline, the original speaker. You're not engaging with the interruption at all. You're behaving as though it barely happened. This is usually where people get it backwards. They think staying calm means staying passive, letting the comment slide with no response whatsoever. But silence alone often reads as agreement or as being caught off guard. The anchor phrase gives you a response without giving the interruption any real estate in the conversation. Pair it with a small physical cue, and this part matters more than people expect. As you say your line, turn your body slightly toward the person or the task that deserves the attention. Don't look at the person who interrupted. That combination, a flat, calm phrase, plus a body turned away from the disruption, tends to read to everyone else in the room as quiet control rather than avoidance. A quick example of how this plays out. Say you're mid-presentation and someone cuts in with a snide comment about your numbers. You don't argue the numbers. You don't ask them to repeat themselves. You say, evenly, "Let's keep moving," and you turn back to your slide. That's it. No eye contact. No pause waiting for their reaction. The emotional effect on the room is usually immediate. People clock that you didn't flinch. And more importantly, they clock that the interrupting comment didn't land anywhere. It just kind of evaporates. One caveat here. because this only works if you deliver it without any edge in your voice. If your anchor phrase comes out sharp or sarcastic, it stops being a redirect and starts being a jab. And now you're back in the exchange you were trying to avoid. Flat and even is the whole point. Practice saying it out loud until it sounds almost boring. That's when you know you've got it. Now, that move handles the interruption in the moment, but there's a bigger habit sitting underneath it that most people never fix. And it's the reason the anchor phrase alone won't be enough for you long term. Before I get to that, if this is already useful, drop a like and keep going, because secret 2 is the one people ask about the most. Secret number 2 is simple to say and hard to actually do. Stop defending yourself ever in public. This one trips people up because it feels backwards. If someone says something unfair about you, isn't defending yourself the obvious response? Here's the mechanism nobody explains. When you defend against something, you're signaling to everyone watching that the accusation landed somewhere true or at least somewhere vulnerable. People generally only defend what they secretly believe needs defending. So the instant you jump in with, "That's not fair," or "That's not what happened," you've confirmed, without meaning to, that there was something worth pushing back on. The room reads your speed and your volume as proof, even when the original comment was baseless. The misconception is that responding fast shows strength. It usually shows the opposite. A quick defensive reaction often reads as insecurity because it looks like you couldn't sit with the comment for even a second before reacting to it. What actually reads as strength is the opposite instinct, a deliberate pause. Not an awkward, panicked pause where you're visibly scrambling, but a calm beat where you take a breath, maybe glance down at your notes or take a sip of water before you speak. That pause communicates something specific to everyone watching. Whatever you're about to say is worth waiting for. You're not rattled, you're choosing your words instead of being pulled into someone else's tempo. Here's how this tends to show up in a real moment. Someone implies in front of the group that you missed something important on a project. The instinct is to jump in immediately and account for every detail. Instead, you pause for a beat, look at your notes, and then simply say your anchor phrase or redirect to the actual facts of the project timeline without ever addressing the implication personally. You're not proving your innocence. You're demonstrating that the accusation didn't rattle you enough to even respond to directly, which, to a room, is often more convincing than any explanation could be. There's an important boundary to this one, and it matters because you don't want this to come across as cold or unreachable. This isn't about freezing someone out forever. If the same person who was rude a moment earlier turns around and contributes something genuinely useful, a fair point, a real question, constructive pushback, you give them your full attention right back, immediately and visibly. That's what keeps this from looking like punishment. You're not withholding attention to be petty. You're simply not rewarding behavior that doesn't deserve a reward, and you're not withholding it from behavior that does. People tend to notice that distinction fairly quickly, and it's usually what shifts how they engage with you going forward, because they realize respect is the entry fee, not something they can skip by being loud. A caveat worth naming here: this only works if it's consistent. If you defend yourself sometimes and stay composed other times, people will learn that persistence eventually gets a reaction out of you, and that turns you into a target rather than a closed door. The pause and the non-defense have to be your default, not your exception. The first two secrets handle the moment itself. The third one is for the situations where staying quiet actually isn't enough, where the behavior is repeated, public, or serious enough that letting it slide would look like you're condoning it. This is the one people ask about the most, because it's the hardest to get right without sounding either weak or aggressive. Call it the cost line, and it has three parts, always delivered in the same order: observation, stakes, behavior. You're going to notice something about this structure, which is that you never appear in it. No I feel, no I don't appreciate, no I at all. That's deliberate. The moment you center yourself in the sentence, it becomes about your feelings, which is easy for someone to dismiss or argue with. Centering the sentence on their behavior and its consequences is much harder to argue with because you're not offering an opinion, you're describing an effect. Part 1 is the observation, and it starts with a neutral adjective rather than a personal statement. Not "I'm surprised," but "it's surprising." Not "I'm concerned," but "it's concerning." This small shift matters more than it seems like it should, because it takes the sentence out of the realm of personal feelings and puts it into the realm of an objective read on the situation, which is much harder to brush off. Part 2 is the stakes, and this is where you name what the behavior is actually putting at risk for the other person, not for you. Their credibility with the team, their standing with leadership, the trust people put in them. Something like, for someone who's worked hard to build trust on this team, that's a strange way to spend it. Or, for someone who clearly wants to be taken seriously in this room, that's a risky way to show it. You're not threatening them. You're simply naming the actual cost of what they just did, out loud, in front of the same audience that witnessed it. Part 3 is the specific behavior. Name plainly and without exaggeration. Not acting like that, which is vague enough to argue about, but the actual thing. Talking over someone. Mocking a colleague's idea. Making a dismissive comment in front of the group. Whatever it specifically was. Vague accusations invite debate. Specific ones don't leave much room for it. Put together, it might sound something like this. It's surprising that someone who spent this long building credibility on this team would risk it by talking over people in front of leadership. That's it. No raised voice, no personal attack, no follow-up justification. And then, immediately, you redirect. You use your anchor phrase, "Let's keep moving," and you go right back to the actual meeting. You don't linger to see their reaction. You don't repeat yourself. You said it once, clearly, and now the room's attention goes back to where it belongs. A quick caveat, because this only works when it's rare. If you use the cost line every time someone so much as raises their voice, it stops carrying weight and starts sounding like a script, which, at that point, it is. Save it for the moments that actually call for it. The repeated pattern, the public dig, the thing that would look like you're condoning it if you let it slide silently. Here's the thread that ties all three of these together, and it's worth sitting with for a second. None of this is about becoming cold or scripted or turning into someone who treats every room like a chess match. It's about understanding that rudeness, most of the time, is a bid for a reaction. And the moment you stop supplying that reaction on demand, the behavior usually loses whatever it was trying to get in the first place. The anchor phrase closes the loop. The pause and the non-defense protect your credibility in real time. And the cost line handles it when silence would actually cost you more than speaking up. Used together, in that order, most rude behavior runs out of oxygen fairly quickly, often faster than people expect. None of this comes naturally the first time you try it, and that's fine. Say the anchor phrase out loud a few times this week, even in low-stakes moments, just so it's already sitting in your mouth the next time you actually need it. That's usually the difference between people who pull this off smoothly and people who freeze and default back to over-explaining themselves. If this was useful, subscribe and keep the notifications on, because next week's video goes deeper into the pause, specifically how to use it in a negotiation, not just a meeting. And that one changes the entire tone of a conversation before you even say a word. Drop a comment with the exact kind of rude comment you deal with most, whether it's the interrupting type, the mocking type, or something else entirely, and I'll build a future video around the most common ones.